All right, welcome back to another episode of Love What You Do. Today we have Brian Gendron. Brian is a serial entrepreneur, founder, and CEO of NocserV and the Riot Comedy Experience. He is in the Houston 40 under 40 class of 2018. He's active in a slew of nonprofit leadership positions, and he is the founder of the Riot Comedy Show at Rudyards on Wall Street in Montrose. Some of the shows, you may have heard of them. Some examples are Comics You Should Know, Minority Report, American AF Comedy Competition, Houston's Funniest Comedy Showcase, The Riot Roast Battle, Saturday Night Late Show, You Look Like Roast Battle, Unbelievable Stories by Egenti, Off the Dome, and many, many more. Many people have graced the Riot stage, including Tommy Drake, Rich Voss, Eddie Pepitone, Andy Huggins, and many more. The Riot has 855-star reviews on Google, which is nuts. And Brian hosts a podcast called Breaking Down Bits, all about comedy, interviewing comedians. And upcoming this March is the Riot Comedy Festival right here in Houston. So thank you, Brian, for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sean.
Cool. Well, let's get started by talking about how, I mean, you're a comedian as well as a producer and many other things. But when did your comedy career start?
So I've been in the game for 3.5 years, and I remember there was a gentleman I used to work with. He was the COO of this technology company I was working for. He had a
Mm-hmm.
son, and his son would. I used to do events and marketing for that business, and his
Yeah.
son would help me with events. He would help me break down, set up, kind of do some of the work. He was younger. He was in high school at the time. And then I remember one day he came in and he said, "Hey, my son's had some success in this stand-up comedy thing. He just got booked on a show, and he's
What?
doing pretty well. And he's real excited about it." So I was like, "Oh wow, I never thought that he would. I never really thought of that of him at all." And then he really
Yeah.
started having some success. This
Wow.
he went on to win this competition put on by the Improvs called the Funniest Comic in Texas. Uh,
Wow.
and then that was when it really, I was like, wait a minute, if this guy could do it, I can do it. And,
Normalized it.
so that was Grady Pruitt. I don't know if you know Grady.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
love Grady. Man, he's so funny.
Yeah. So I
So
used to work
funny.
with Grady's dad. And uh,
Awesome.
I was having some tectonic shifts in my life around that time. I just had my
Mm-hmm.
second kid. Shortly thereafter, I went sober from alcohol, and it was just this
Congrats.
weird time. And he had told
Yeah.
me that Grady, or I'd experienced Grady performing at Rudyards, which was a 5-minute walk from my house. And so during that period of time, I was kind of going and watching comedy, watching all these people
Yeah.
that have been prominent in the Houston comedy scene: Dusty Rhodes, Josh Stokes, Ashton
Sure.
Womack, a bunch of people,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
of course
yeah.
Grady. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, I kept being like, hey, eventually I'm going to do this thing. And I remember it was April 1st, so April Fool's Day. I actually signed
Uh-huh.
up, got up, did it, and I still have the tape. A comedian named Steve Cantwell called me up. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, no, Steve.
He called the person before me, and there's no movement. And then he goes, "Well, that's the sound of a comedy career going to die." And then and then he called me up, so I wasn't ready. I was expecting one more
Right.
person
You
to
it was a
buffer.
jump.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh.
yeah, and then just bombed for 2 minutes straight. And
Yeah.
I was like, "This is a horrible, horrible mistake." And then I told a bit, and it's a bit that I still tell today, kind of about the Montrose neighborhood and my experience. Or really, it's about the generation, my dad's generation, the Boomer generation, not understanding gay culture is what the joke's about. And I
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
got
it's a
a
great joke.
laugh, yeah, and I got a laugh from Greg Deal. I'll never forget that. And then I got another couple laughs from the audience, and I started to find some traction. And then I was
Yeah,
leaving.
yeah.
I was like, man, that felt pretty good. And I was leaving, and somebody in the audience, while I was crossing the street, stopped their SUV and stuck their head out and said, "Hey, that was your first time. That was pretty good." And I was like, "Wow, yeah."
Wow.
So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
listened to
yeah.
the set on the walk home, and then I texted Grady, and I was like, "Where do I do this tomorrow night? And where do I do
Yeah.
this on Wednesday
And for
night?"
the rest of my life.
Yeah. And then from there, it was just 10, 12 mics a week for 6 months or whatever
That's
it was.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that bit about your dad and the club is so funny.
Mhm.
Was your dad a funny person growing up? Was your family anyone funny that sort of inspired that, or
No,
what's your?
I used to hang out with funny families growing up, but
Yeah,
mine wasn't really one of them. No.
yeah. Um, so let's talk about the writing process. And I remember that my first open mic was just like you're just throwing stuff out there. You have no idea until you hear that first laugh to even know where to go. You're very lost. So when did you sort of start to figure out your voice, your perspective, and what was that development like in writing like?
Yeah. So initially, I was doing a lot of shock because that was getting the most response. So really kind
Sure.
of filthy, just
Yeah, easy.
that's what audiences responded to, especially at
Yeah.
some of these. Some of these are really rough rooms. Like you're in, like this place
Sure.
called Darwin's. There's a your stage here and a bar right here, and
Yep.
everybody's noisy. Everybody's half paying attention. So you just have to
That's a
put
tough
stuff
one.
out there that gets any sort of response. That's where you start. And
Yeah, yeah.
then eventually, I got taken in by sort of this group of comics that had a group chat, and I got to start kind of
Mhm.
working with them and started to really
Right.
be like, oh, okay, I'm kind of accepted at least somewhat.
Yeah,
And
sure.
some of these bits, after telling them enough times, you start to kind of find your way with them just naturally.
Totally.
Then I started just taking writing more seriously and thinking about read a couple books and but mostly just
Yep.
getting up and trying new stuff and trying different stuff. And as far as finding your voice and your position, I still feel like there's a lot more work for me to do with that.
Mhm.
But certainly have taken on the role of embraced the role of a husband, father. You know, like
Yeah.
those spaces are places
Trying
where
to
I can
figure it out.
yeah, where I can find some unique material with some unique
Yeah.
angles that's unique to me and fun to tell. So that's really where I've fallen into for the most part with my material that
Do you
I've embraced.
do you feel that some of your material kind of jumps out at you through your life? Like you're like, oh, that's funny. And then you sit down and write? Or is it more of a deliberate act or both?
The latter, yeah. It mostly jumps out at me. Like today, I got my kid's report card, and my kid's 4, and he's in
Yeah.
pre-K 3. He's in like the first school you'll ever go to.
Right.
And I'm looking at
Right.
this report card, and I'm like, it says all these nice things. I'm like, nobody ever gets a bad. These kids don't get bad report cards. So I'm like, what if I made my kids like really bad? If the premise is like they're all great, and then I'm like my kid's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
bad,
yeah.
and then what could he do? So that's like, hey, maybe
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
there's an
yeah.
idea there. Maybe that's something I can explore writing. And
Sort of just the counter of the reality and what would it look like and kind of world building on that,
yeah,
like
so
what would happen if.
usually it's these
Yeah.
little moments in time that you write down somewhere and just say, I'm gonna put a pin in this. I'm gonna revisit this when I have a little bit more time. And when I revisit those things, a
Yeah.
lot of it's in places you might not expect. It's at the end of a yoga class. It's
Yeah.
I've been taking a lot of
In the shower.
in the shower. Yeah, sure. In the shower.
Yeah.
These places where you can find sort of limited distraction, periods of meditation. Lately, I've been taking long bike rides around the city with classical music. That's been really helpful for
Yeah.
inspiring new comedy, new business ideas.
Huge. Huge. Yeah. Do you ever have you ever had that moment where you're like, I won't forget that.
All the
And
time.
then you totally
Oh my
forget it.
gosh. Yeah.
It's the worst. It's the
And I
worst.
always tell
Like
myself, I'm never going to let myself do it
goals
again.
slipping.
And I do it
Oh,
so many
and then you do
times.
it again. Like I won't. That's so funny. I won't forget it, and then it's gone. Um, so you kind of spoke on this, but what does it feel like to bomb?
It's like an out of body experience,
Yeah,
I feel like.
it's the worst.
And then you can feel yourself like kind of you have this physiological reaction, your biological
Yep,
reaction, like just
yep,
and
yep.
you'll find yourself maybe like you know short of breath. I've been short of breath and
Yeah,
trying to get out ideas just and it
yep.
throws off your timing, it throws off your rhythm, and you're
Yeah,
just like, man, I've
it's dreadful.
got to get out of here. But as you get better, you start to develop more tools, and
Mm-hmm.
you develop like back out jokes that can get a laugh, like
Totally.
acknowledge that you're bombing, and then maybe move
Right.
into
Easy laugh.
yeah, easy laugh, and then don't take that for granted. Now move into some crowd work or use some other tools in your chest
Yeah.
to make
Yeah.
the set, salvage the set. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Even like you could even and I think the trick there is to calm yourself because if you can calm yourself, then you can get back into the rhythm.
yeah,
But if you keep going off the rails, it just gets worse. You know, it's like I don't know, it's a total shutdown.
yeah.
But I've seen guys that they'll address that they're bombing and then maybe apologize or someone's on a date ruining their date and then it's just kind of like and then they're back into it and everything's fine. That's a real skill to be able to pull out of that. um, it just takes practice.
Yeah,
You
in
know.
fact, I've in recent months, I would say, I've worked a lot on crowd work. I started off all my shows with some crowd work up top, and that's got me way more comfortable
Yeah.
in that space. And it's
Sure.
and open mics. One of the tricks of open mics is being a good bomber. That's how you can do well at an open mic, because you're trying out new
Yeah.
ideas and then being
You're
comfortable in the
right.
bomb. And so that's been, although I don't get to go to as many open mics as I'd like because I'm so busy with the produced shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do enjoy doing them now, and I do enjoy being able to bomb and have fun with it, and but still get a little bit of progress and some new material.
Yeah, and I think there's something about sort of the culture of comedians because I personally I've never met a group of people quite like comedians,
It's fair.
and whatever I thought they were before, it's just it's so much better than I could have expected. And I think there's this sort of um, everyone's kind of neutralized. You know, everyone's ego gets neutralized in these open mics, and you might think you're the funniest guy, and but you still, in order to improve, you have to go back to ground zero with a new joke. So it kind of keeps everyone very sort of vulnerable and supportive. And so that is interesting that, yeah, those open mics is where you get comfortable. You have to get comfortable in that bomb and you never really get out of that. I don't think you kind of always need to keep working on that. So what does it feel like to murder?
Man, I remember I did a show in February of this year with Jim Gaffigan, and it was like
Yeah.
2,300 people, and it was an interesting group. It was all ranchers, like real cowboys from all
Oh,
around the country,
okay.
and they just had this long conference, and they were just this is the very end of it. They all had some wine and some good food outside, and they were just and it's what I understand. This is their only vacation, this conference every year because they have to be with their cattle. This is the one time they get
So
away.
they
So
let
they're just
loose.
letting loose and like just like three
Yeah.
applause breaks and just it was just basically you get this energy and then
Just
it's
think it.
just
Yeah.
super easy for you to return it. It
Yeah.
makes your job so much. The joke you've written the jokes, they're funny. You've tested them. You're putting your best material out there for a crowd that big, and they
Yeah.
just give you their trust that it's funny, and they give you the support you need to just enjoy it.
They want you to do well. Like they're there to enjoy
A hundred
something
percent,
versus make me laugh,
a
you
100%.
clown. Kind of, you might get from
The
other
tale of
guys.
two shows we had this weekend. We had one of the roughest runs we've had at the Riot this weekend for a variety of reasons.
Really?
But one show,
Yeah.
we had a guy. This is a good crowd. Every time somebody would come to the stage, he would go, "Let's go, Brandon." And that's a bad example, but whoever's coming up on stage,
Right.
right? And then
Yeah.
versus, we had another guy who during the middle of somebody's set goes next. And if you think about those two
Oh.
energies, like I wasn't hosting that one. I would have, in hindsight, I would have asked that person to like, look, you need to be supportive. Everybody will have a better experience.
Right.
I've kind of thought
Sure.
that through, but yeah, I mean, the energy of the crowd, or even the energy of one person or one very drunk person who needs to be removed, that throws off
Can
a
kill it.
set or a whole show.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the image of all the comedians is very confident. I mean, that's what it takes to uh, project a good time, and you're sort of if you're confident and comfortable, they're comfortable. But deep down, there's a lot of sensitive guys up there. So when you have someone like, so I guess heckling. I mean, let's talk about that. I mean, what's how do you handle a heckler when you're the host? It's a little different because you're kind of the guy in charge, and it's not so
Mm.
personal. But when you're the comedian, you get heckled. Like, what's that like? How do you handle that, or have you learned to handle
Yeah,
that?
I don't get heckled per se very much. I
Right.
remember one time I got heckled really bad. And I actually wrote a joke about it because I really didn't know how to
Yeah.
handle it. I was really new at the time. This guy was just
Yeah.
so out of his
I
he
wouldn't
was so
know
out of
it.
his mind drunk. He didn't even every time I said something, he would
Yeah.
just have a response for it. And there's no reaching this guy. He's so hammered. And then I thought that the
Yeah.
joke is like I was like, man, I had a heckler the other night and I really gave it to him on my ride home because I had nothing to get back to him.
Right. Yeah. That was a good one
But
though. Yeah.
I think in a lot of cases, unfortunately, you got to address it. Here's the problem with it though. Like if I have a heckler and it's in the middle of my bit, and I usually do 1 to 2 minute bits, it throws off my rhythm.
Yeah.
It'll space out jokes to where they won't work. They won't hit as hard. And so sometimes
Yeah. It's distracting
correct.
too.
Yeah. And sometimes, so I've learned depending on what joke I'm in and where I'm in the joke, to sometimes just ignore it.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Right.
work with it, put it in the act. Sometimes shut it down, and that can go against you. If the crowd hates that person too, then you can win. But
Right.
if the crowd's like isn't sure
Totally.
about you, or you're not confident, then
Or they don't want to
or
pick a
they want to pick
side.
a side,
You-
now the room's just awkward, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of
Totally.
times it'll be somebody just kind of going all night, and the audience is sick of them too,
Yeah.
and you can kind of
And just for the audience to understand, when I say heckle, you imagine this very aggressive person, but really heckling usually starts with like a genuine. Generally, it's someone trying to be part of the show, or it's not malicious usually. And in that case, you either kind of slightly address it or ignore it, and they kind of get the point, like they're not part of the
I think
show. Or,
what
you know,
my biggest strategy for that is to make sure everybody's comfortable, to really show some hospitality in the room, especially when I'm the host, right? So
yeah,
everybody gets greeted and
right,
seated and explained where everything
yeah.
is. Here's another big one, like up top, it's always birthdays, anniversaries, anybody celebrating anything. Because I've had a situation where if you don't acknowledge those things, they'll just blurt it out in the middle of the
They
show.
they need you to
Yeah.
know. Yeah,
So you get that out of
yeah.
the way up top. So if
Smart.
you clear all that out, it really lowers the likelihood of anybody huckling.
I was going to say I've been to dozens and dozens of Riot shows, and I can't think of a single instance of somebody heckling, somebody trying to talk to Patrick or
Mhm.
something, and he handles it perfectly, almost like it's not a big
Right.
deal. But yeah, I don't really see that. I mean, in
It's pretty
general,
rare. We had a
um,
strange collection of people.
yeah,
Like last week was, the Astros were playing
it's
in the
odd.
in the series, and
It's true. A lot of emotions,
yeah, and it was Halloween, so
a lot of drinking.
the people that came out, it was a strange group of people that came out. It wasn't our regular
Yeah,
crowd, and yeah, it's just hostile. It's different. It makes your job way more difficult. It makes it
yeah.
work.
Yeah, and you guys do, even up top. You are explicit about no
Yeah,
heckling the comedians. I mean, you
yeah,
say
you can
that
hold them
in the
accountable.
opener. So anyone who's like not
Yeah,
sure,
that's
yeah,
why you can hold
like
them accountable.
they
You can go
know.
back to it and say, hey, if it
And
happens again,
that
then
helps,
you're out of here. Fortunately, we got to get
right?
you out of here. But
And
it's
then
pretty
and then
rare we
pull them.
actually have to enforce anything like that. It
Yeah.
happens.
So so when did you go from make the jump from comedian to, hey, I want to put together some shows, producer, and then
Yeah,
what?
well, it was
How did that
supposed to happen right before
come
the
about?
pandemic. I had the concept for the Riot, and the Riot was initially supposed to be a part stand-up, part variety show, which is where Riot actually comes from, or part of where Riot comes from. Of course, there's like
Cool.
Riot is synonymous with loud laughter, but
Yeah.
also, we put the Riot in variety. So I wanted to have something that we could do regularly where people would want to come back because they knew they're always going to get something different and always get something special. So that was the original concept. I booked 6 shows. The first one was supposed to be March 16th with a comic called Roxy Hayes. She was going
Mhm.
to do stand up and karaoke. She does this fun karaoke thing. And then the world shut
Cool.
down on March 15th. I remember where I was when they said the rodeo was shutting down, and that's when in Houston it's
Right.
like,
That was
oh,
a
that's
huge.
serious. Yeah, that means
That's when it started. That's when the
yeah. So
shutdown
our
began.
show was
Yeah.
like the next day or the day after or whatever. So that shut it down. But you
Oh
originally
man.
start. This is what happens. The original reason most people, including myself, would start a show is because it's currency. Like you want to get more stage time. You're not getting stage time. You're not
Totally.
getting booked as much as you like. So you're like, look, if I run a show, then I can put you on my show in hopes that you will put me on your show, right?
You're
So
part
that's
of
how
it.
it
Yeah.
initially started. And I had actually produced a charity comedy show prior to that. I had a lot of experience, philanthropic experience, been on boards,
Hmm.
chaired galas, those types of things. So
Comedy was a
yeah, it was an easy
perfect match
transition.
for
And there
that.
was also an
Yeah.
opportunity for me to again, start booking and start, um,
Yeah.
gaining currency in the comedy scene. So I did the Ha Ha for Hope. That was my very first show. And then I did another one at the Improv. The Improv allowed me to put it on, which was a lot of fun. And then that
That
kind of
was
gave me the
awesome.
credibility to go to Rudyards and their new management who was looking to add more stand up and say, hey, here's what I've done at the Improv. I'd love to run a weekly in your room. It's a great room for
Sure.
comedy, and that's why we got the agreement to move forward. Now, of course, the pandemic hit, and that set us
Yeah.
back 2 months. And the first show
Okay.
we put on, we stayed true to first couple shows we put on. We stayed true to that theme. In that the very first comic I booked was John Wessling, and he headlined, and then his
Hmm.
feature was Tommy Drake. These are two kind of iconic Houston comedians. And
Yeah.
Tommy was, I don't know if you know this, but Tommy used to be a street performer. And so he did the variety
Mm.
act. He juggled, I think it was a bowling ball, an apple, and a sword, I want to say. And then he ended up like
That
catching
sounds
the
safe.
sword in his mouth with the apple and
In the
yeah,
apple.
something crazy like
Ugh.
that.
Yeah. Intense.
And then our second show, I had this girl, Katie Miller. She used to be a baton twirler in college, so I had her go out and twirl the baton for 10 seconds. And then I don't want to book these
Yeah.
variety acts. I just want to do stand up. So
It just didn't have the vibe you
nah,
expected.
yeah, and it was just too much of a hassle.
Yeah.
So I just ended up doing
Yeah.
stand up from there on out.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I don't want to say it's not simple, but it's, I can see the process that comes together, with comedians. And I mean, they just have to show up. There's not too much technical stuff going on. It's a microphone, so I guess that does simplify sort of what you're dealing with. Um, so I've noticed, because I got onto the scene like, I think 2021. I think right as we were coming out of the pandemic is kind of when I did my first open mic, and very quickly came across the Riot. And at one point, I think it was my first show that I was like paid for, which blew my mind, was you guys. Much appreciated, by the way. And there was a distinctly different culture about your room in uh, how you handle customers and comedians. Can you kind of talk about that? Because I can tell it's not just like, it's deliberate. Like, it's a deliberate culture. It feels like
Yeah,
you try to.
absolutely. No, it's so our focus has always been about audience experience and
Yeah.
creating an experience. So what we noticed was that, or what I noticed was that comedians generally, when they were producing a show, it really felt about them. It really felt about the comedian's experience. How good of a time were they having?
Right.
If they were having a good time, then the audience would, and that's true. That's probably true. But
Yeah.
the most important thing about comedy is getting people out to the shows. And
For sure.
the quickest way for you to for me or for anybody to do that, in my opinion, was to add hospitality to this thing. It just seemed like every club I went to, every
Yeah.
show I performed on, there was just a complete absence of hospitality. And if you could
Yeah.
show any level of hospitality in this business, yeah,
It would be
and
huge.
just show that you in this, even
Yeah.
put a little effort in. Like, it started with reinvesting our first. I didn't put $1 into the Riot, not zero. It was sort of sweat
Awesome.
marketing to get the first one, a couple off the ground, and then any money that we made, we reinvested. And so my first investments were in brand. It was table tents. It was a banner,
Yeah.
and a couple things that really solidified that we were an actual something, right? People
Yeah.
attach
It makes the
yeah, and
room
then people
yours.
attach themselves to brand, especially if it's a good experience. And so it's this
Sure.
combination of creating
Yeah.
this hospitality, this audience experience, and connecting it to something tangible like the brand, the Riot, and really giving some more depth to that. And then just finding people that understood what we were doing, not just from the talent side, but
Yep.
also from my team side, from people that we brought on over the
For sure.
years, and then just really making some sort of core values, some things. So I have a background in business, right? I started a business to varying
Yeah.
successes. I've had some fail, and those are some of the best to have. Uh, and just
Sure.
learned a lot of what not to do, just a lot of the hard way, a little bit through
Hmm.
mentorship, and just applied
Yeah.
some business principles to this thing and hospitality. And that's really the core of what makes it different.
Yeah. And I can see it. And like you said, with the people that you hire, like, and I don't know if you hire the bartenders, but from the bartenders to uh, the the ticket person at the bottom of the stairs, like, everyone is just so nice, like, out of their way. Um, and I don't think it's because I'm a performer. I mean, it's like they're always trying to find an excuse to strike up a conversation. I mean, they're just so like outgoing and deliberately focused on customer service. So um, that is that's awesome. How do you juggle sort of the family work? Because I mean, this is a gig where you're out late
Mhm.
nights. It's a little out of the norm. How do you juggle all
Yeah,
that
it was
with the
a
family?
rough start because at first I told my wife I would be out, one night a week, one every other week.
Once a
But I
week.
mean, well, she got before the pandemic, she got used to the open mic thing. But for the most part, I was helping getting the
Right.
kids in bed, and comedy starts 8, 9 at night, so it was pretty
Sure.
complementary to my family
That's
life.
true.
But since
Yeah. Yeah.
starting the show and since the growth of the show, it's definitely taken on. It's more of a commitment. What was once every other week then became once a week, and then it became twice a week. Then it became 3 nights a week and 4 nights a week. And these are all weekend, Thursday through Sunday.
Thursday,
Yeah,
Friday,
all
Saturday, Sunday shows, and sometimes two shows a
no,
night.
most at least 2 shows a night. So it's two
Most
shows or three
At
shows a
least two
night.
shows
Yeah,
a
so
night.
it's all night,
Wow.
and
Wow.
it's crept in a little bit earlier than I would have originally liked, cutting in a little bit of family
Yeah.
time, like Thursday and Friday, for example. But
Sure.
for the most part, it's complementary in that
Yeah.
I was at my kid's soccer practice yesterday. Picked up my kid, dropped off, picked up my kid from school today. I have those opportunities, and then as they get older, if there's opportunities to coach or certainly make any of their sports or music or whatever
Sure.
extracurriculars, yeah,
That's all
I'm
during the
there for
day.
it. So
That's
it's the
awesome.
balance. It's been good, and then but my wife was frustrated at first because those are like date nights and all that stuff. But we've adapted, and now
Sure.
Monday, Tuesday, usually Tuesday is a date night, and we found that to be kind of nice. It's
Awesome.
easier to get tables at places, and
Yeah.
yeah, you can move around a
Reservations.
little
Yeah.
easier. There's
Yeah.
less
Yeah.
people out, so we've just adapted and adjusted. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Glad to hear that. Um, so do you, this is a question. So I spoke at a conference on Monday about how stand-up comedy helped me become a better marketer. And so I'm just curious for you, sort of separating the two, you as a comedian and you as a business person, the skills and the things that you learn from bombing, from getting comfortable in failure, from overcoming, kind of thickening your skin, social skills. Like what are the things that you developed as a result of doing comedy?
For sure, a better communicator. Really thinking
Mm,
about how to say things, how they'll be received, maybe the most importantly. But the biggest
yeah.
thing I've got is just the hustle of just moving tickets and B2C. I thought B2C. I swore I would never work in B2C because I thought I'd always been in B2B ever since
Yeah.
I graduated college. I worked in tech and working with
Hmm.
companies, and I was like, look, like you know,
More
yeah, I think
predictable.
so. And then I'm like, look, B2C, like working with the general public, they're idiots. But here's what I found. I've
Yeah.
had some
Yeah.
experiences towards the latter part of my technology career, which I'm still more or less in, but where I
Yeah.
realized that well, in B2B, it's businesses are just a collection of organized idiots. So it's even
Correct. I was
worse.
just gonna say,
Yeah.
like, I've met a few.
So
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Or no
honestly,
better,
in
but yeah.
B2C
Yeah.
space, I mean, I can't even count. I mean, we've sold tens of thousands of tickets at this point. I would say, maybe I hope that's accurate, but
That's
I
amazing.
can't even count on one hand how many negative customer interactions I've had to deal with. It's insane
Yeah.
how great the working with the public has
Yeah.
been.
Well, that and I think the
Correct.
product you're selling. I mean, it's
Correct.
comedy. It's, to me, it's like I mean, you got to be a real, I don't know, piece of work to complain
Right.
about comedy, but I don't know. I guess those people are out there somewhere. Um, so what tips do you have for maybe people thinking about getting into
Don't.
comedy or, trying to get booked on a show? Yeah. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that wraps up the podcast. Yeah. Like, or trying to get booked on your show, or maybe some of the, tips and tricks on how to kind of make your way
Yeah, I
in
mean,
this
just
business.
from getting started, you just got to hit some open mics, get comfortable being on stage, get
Yeah.
comfortable in writing. Judy Carter's Comedy Bible is a great great place to start from
So
your
good.
writing perspective. So read that, work the
Yeah.
process that she lines out. That's a perfect way to tune in some material, and then get on stage and try some stuff and fail a bunch, and then network is a
Yeah.
big thing. Make sure you're
Yep.
introducing yourself to everybody. They probably won't be very receptive at first, but that's okay. They just need to keep you to
Yep.
keep seeing you
Give
come
it
out.
time.
Once they see you out, enough times, then they'll start to get more comfortable. And that's how you work your way into the scene, work your way into getting booked. And then from getting a book to a couple things, a couple tips, make sure your social media is all in alignment and cleaned up and you're easy to find. And if you're serious about it, create your own comedy pages and get all that stuff in line before you start reaching out to get booked, which is a good recommendation. Mm-hmm.
That's a good tip.
Because we're always try to be some of the earliest to book people on paid shows. We give everybody a good shot. We've got a fun, real fun show called Unusual Suspects. We just had one. It was great. It was the audiences are always great because they always bring their people out and. Probably so. And then we mix in pros, so it's balanced, and everybody's trying their best. So and we explain it up top, like everybody's doing their hot five, and that's the whole goal when you first start. Get to 5 minutes.
Yeah. And you tell them that they're
so everybody's bought into that idea. They're all supportive, and it's great. Totally. I love those audiences. So but when I do that, sometimes in booking new comics, and it's hard to find them, and so it's hard to communicate with them or to book them. Like make yourself easy to be found by bookers. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I remember getting up there and it was a great crowd and it went well and I was just like zombieing off the stage. It was just mumbling to myself or something. It was just it was a crazy experience. It wasn't a bomb, but it was like something about doing well just like was overwhelming to me. So, man, yeah. You have a festival coming up. So that's ambitious. What was the jump from, what you're doing now to throw a festival and block off a road? And that's big.
Ambitious is the right word. I can't sit still. We've got something good. We've been building something good and I just got to keep growing. I will get complacent. I'm not one to get complacent. I would get bored. And it just seemed like the next logical step in the growth of our business and something that I could do in the community. So one thing that definitely differentiates us from a lot of comedy clubs out there is that, and it's partly because of my background, but I'm very focused on we're a part of this community, not just in the comedy world. Like it feels like most comedy clubs are like, we're this comedy thing and you come into it and then you leave and you're out of it. Whereas I think I view you
want roots
in the community for sure. Like on Sunday, me and my team went out and we sponsored a crawfish boil for Casa de Esperanza, a local charity. Awesome. I'm a part of the Visitors and Convention Bureau, the VCB here in Houston. So I mix and mingle with all the other entertainment offerings in the city and the hotels and everything in the hospitality space, whatever it is. So
they're bringing people in from out of state, and if they ask them where's a good place to go, you're it's a good people
absolutely
to be around.
It's a great lead source, but also it's good to just be in tune with your community. I made a decision maybe 7 or 8 years ago when I started my first company that I was going to be the best at whatever I do in Houston, and then from there I could then expand and be the best in the country. And so
but you wanted to hit that pinnacle first.
Yeah, I think so. But so the tech company wasn't it. My heart wasn't in it. The pandemic really helped me be like, oh yeah, your heart's not in this thing. And so the Riot was like, oh wow, this is something you're really passionate about. Love what you do, right? The festival. I actually live in the neighborhood where the Riot, where Rudyards is, where we host the Riot.
Yeah.
So it's also extra special for me to put on something in my own very neighborhood. I've lived here for 12 years. To be able to put on something for my city, that's a real event, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
And I think it's an insane amount of work, and I don't know that I'm going to get all my money back, if any. We'll see where that goes, but it's not about that. And I do think that in year 2, once we know more. Once we have good footage and we put on this good experience, because I'm willing to lose money to make sure it's the experience that I envisioned. And so we're doing that. And I honestly, I think I'll come in the black just because we're doing it the right way. But I'm okay if I don't.
Sure.
For this first one.
Yeah, and I think that you have such a positive reputation certainly, I don't know your community. I'm out in Katy, but certainly in the comedy community, I mean, you're going to have no doubt overwhelming support. I mean, I'm going to go to the festival, I mean, so I think it's going to go
Well, it's
really
really
well.
exciting. We've got,
And I'm looking forward
I
to
think I have
supporting it.
18 headliners that we've paid to come in from New York and in LA. We've
Awesome.
got a national comedy contest that we're
Yep.
by Thursday, by the 3rd of November, we're going to have all 24 of our visiting comedians selected for that contest. That's been an online thing we've been doing for the
Amazing.
last 2 weeks. It's been
Yeah.
we at the end of it, we
How
will
many
have
videos have
watched
you watched?
40 hours of tape between me and my
Wow.
team. So,
Yeah.
which is that most festivals,
It's a lot of
yeah, most
comedy.
festivals don't offer that
It's,
level of transparency. We do it on a live server, and so people can come in and join. We get the
yep.
results in real time. We email out the
Oh,
results at
that's
the end.
awesome.
It's something I have not seen
So well
out
done.
there. People really appreciate it, especially the ones that move on, and even the ones that don't. They thank me and say,
Yeah.
"Hey, thanks for the transparency.
It's
This is
fair.
yeah,
And
at least we
yeah,
know." And
that's
so
awesome.
yeah, so it's just, and then I've got some cool things like I found this 28-foot tall inflatable astronaut we're putting on the roof at Rudyards. We're putting a tent on the parking lot.
To
Yeah, exactly.
advertise.
For a month before, putting
Yeah.
a tent
Yeah.
on the parking lot surface, 82 by 82-foot tent. We're expecting about 500 people. We've got Jim
Wow.
Beam Sumray coming out to sponsor, a couple other sponsors. They're going to help us with some
Perfect.
bars and some other stuff in the street that we're going to use. We've got a bunch of vendors that we're talking to that are going to sell stuff at the festival,
Yeah.
and
Still looking for
yeah,
sponsors?
sponsors absolutely,
Yep.
and just a true carnival festival experience during March, which
It's
is, in my
amazing.
opinion, is always the best time of year weather-wise to be in Houston. So right after the rodeo, the weekend after the rodeo, and the weekend
Right.
before the NCAA Final Four basketball tournaments here in Houston. So it's just a little seam of where I think we
Wow.
can have a impactful event in the city.
That's amazing. And you're going to conduct the national contest at the
Yep,
festival, right?
absolutely. Yep. So
Awesome.
it's a 4-day
Awesome.
festival, and yeah, over by on the fourth day on Sunday, we will have crowned the national champion. That person wins
That's
$2,500. They'll get them a
amazing.
big trophy. They get to headline the Riot, bragging rights, all that stuff.
Totally. That's awesome. And then what's the future for the Riot? I know that's a
No, I
lot
mean,
there,
there's a
but
lot we have cooking right now. So I'm working on a software app, a comedy club management app. I think that I recognize that
cool.
this industry is lagging sometimes all the way back to the 90s, in some
In
cases back
tech.
to the 70s in some of our practices.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
there's definitely some room for innovation. So I'm working on that right now. I'm exploring new locations in either West Houston or North Houston, so another location in the Houston area. But I'm also next
Yep.
week I'll be up in Brooklyn, New York. It's my second trip up there, trying to find our Brooklyn location. My co-producer Drew
So
Jordan
cool.
moved to New York 3-4 months ago,
Mm-hmm.
so we're trying to find one that he can get started up and running. And so I think
Awesome.
short term, and when I say short term, I think let's say 3 to 4 years. It looks like we'll probably have 3, maybe 4 operating clubs, and ideally some a successful comedy festival, as well as some software that we can license out to
Yeah.
other clubs. And then
It's incredible.
looking more like 5 to 10 years, expanding into some other markets, especially some Texas markets, and um, looking at exploring things like the metaverse is something that we're looking into now, making
Mm-hmm.
some early investments there, and trying to see if we can't
Yeah.
create a truly immersive experience that feels like stand up, and which is really neat, because then you can bring this comedy experience if it's authentic. And since I'm a comedian, I know what authentic
Yeah.
feels like from a comedy perspective.
Right.
And then our mindset's always about
Right.
audience experience too, right? So I think we know what we're looking for. I just don't think it's out there yet. And
Do you see it as a hybrid where you're having a live show
no, I
and
don't. I
virtuals,
don't.
or
I
purely
think purely
virtual?
virtual. I think that we'll have. I think the finished product means we'll have these virtual spaces in LA and New York, where this is where all the comedians live, where they can go and perform
Yeah.
during the day when they wouldn't otherwise have shows, and it's such an immersive
Mm-hmm.
experience that it feels like it is a live show. Uh, is where I believe this whole
Wow.
thing is heading. And so
Yeah.
the neat part about that is then you can reach these comedy experiences with people who maybe need it the most, like people in like a hospital bed, right? Because they can't get out, or
For
people
sure.
in remote parts of the
So
world
cool.
that wouldn't otherwise get these experiences, the troops, those types of things, right? So, so
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
big vision
Okay.
with maybe the future of
It's big
comedy.
picture, man.
In addition to more
Yeah.
traditional things like the clubs and traditional web based software. Mhm.
That's amazing. Um, well, you're one of the smartest guys I know,
Well,
and you know, as far as like just how long was it from the your open mic? When
that
was
was
that?
April 1st,
Till
2019. Uh-huh. Yeah.
right. So you've done a lot. It's
Yeah,
been
we've got
you've been
the,
busy.
hopefully, I mean, I don't know. We've got the one club and actually today we just built our new
Yeah.
stage. They put it up today, which is exciting. So we're expanding our room, which is real. It was 100, if you see it's about 110 as it's set up now. We should get to about 140,
Yeah.
150 with the new setup. So that's
That's
good because it
awesome.
allows us to grow even in our own, in our own space there. We can book bigger acts, bigger draw,
Yeah.
more
More
revenue, more
tickets.
tickets. Yeah. And it allows us to do more revenue
Yeah.
means we can do more things faster. So yeah, it's just insane that this,
Sure.
in a sort of a 2 year period, we've been able to build this business to the level that it is. And, next year we're
Yeah.
projecting over 1 million in sales to go to that from $0 investment is in less than, in about 3 years in any business. Is just,
Does Grady Pruitt try to take
ah,
credit for this all
no, but
or
we work with him on a special. So that was good. Yeah.
yeah, I saw him do his I saw him working I saw him do his full hour prior to the
Yeah.
special and he just murdered. It's
Well, and
so
actually, now that
funny.
I mentioned it, I forgot another important thing that we're working on. So we're working on our more immediate project in tech as my world's converging,
Yeah.
right, is the Riot Digital. So we're
Yeah.
really Drew Jordan, my previous
Awesome.
co-producer I mentioned earlier. He was really big in the video
Yep.
and audio world for us. We've built upon what
Yeah.
Drew did, and part of the room renovation is getting this room set up to do more recordings, quality video, quality audio, and being able to put out short
Yeah.
specials and content
Content.
on YouTube Reels, Instagram, TikTok, those types of things. And so, following
Perfect.
the sort of the current trend and current model, Don't Tell Comedy really is pace setting this, in my opinion, or Mint, and there's a few others out there, but following that model will keep us kind of
Yeah.
current, and then things like the metaverse and that kind of stuff kind of
Right.
keeps us looking forward. Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah, getting in on all the vertical video stuff
Yeah,
I
so
think would be
we have the
huge.
gear. Our
TikTok,
next
all
step
that.
was to get the aesthetic right in the room, and so that's what the renovation is allowing us to do. We had
Mhm.
some creative control as far as what things would look like, and so far they look great. We just saw some pictures today. I haven't been by yet, but yeah, it's going to be,
That's awesome.
and it's going to be a better room for comedy the way the layout's going to be.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, big things happening. So your shows are every Thursday through Sunday at the Riot. They can go to the Riot.
The
What's the website?
riothdx.com. Mm-hmm.
To buy tickets. And I guess just to end things, what is it? What do you love the most about what you do?
So the I've always enjoyed hosting, just entertaining.
Yeah.
And so
Mm-hmm.
getting to give people this positive experience and then seeing them come back and bring friends, that's just so fulfilling to be
Yeah.
like, I've created something. I mean, it's still, even to this day, every time I get a ticket sale, I get an email, and like
Sure.
every time I get an email, I'm like, I've created something that somebody wants to do. And I get hundreds of those emails a
Yeah. An
week, but it's
experience.
just really rewarding
Yeah.
to know
Yeah.
that I created that, and that the comedian, and also that the comedians that we work with are growing. It's so fun to watch comedians grow and get better. And
Sure.
then it's sad and it hurts
Mm-hmm.
our business sometimes. Not as it hurts our business, but when they move on and they go to New York and
When they
stuff, we're like,
leave.
oh, I really liked having them
uh,
here, but
yeah.
you're also so proud of them
Bittersweet.
for moving on and supportive of them. So I mean,
Sure.
there's just so many things that I find rewarding about this. It's just really fulfilling. But certainly those are the two main ones.
Awesome. All right, Brian. We're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much
Thanks,
for
Sean.
being on the show, episode 3. And I'm sure I'll see you soon at one of your upcoming shows. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.